And just to start off nice and gently, standing comfortably. As our experience grows with these postures and these movements, we continually refine them. The important thing is not to be rushed with this. So the phrase I like is start where you are. And so even if you've been doing this for a long time, there may be reasons you might have a step back or something like that that stops you from sort of getting properly into the posture. So the start of these sessions is always a sort of settling in period. And one of the ways we do that is just by paying attention to our posture. Try and have your feet hip width apart, toes pointing forwards as much as possible. Have your weight a little bit forwards and see if you can just let your hips settle back. So a slight curve in your hips and a slight curve in your knees. Sometimes described as though you have a little ball tucked in behind your knee. And this is the posture where we start to develop an awareness of this aspect of Tai Chi that we refer to as central equilibrium. The combination of qualities, basically, that give us this overall feel of the postures, and that we want to take into the movements that we make. So just bringing your attention to the center part of your body, your hips and your waist, and begin to turn there. So, as always, this is a very common starting exercise. It has, as most things do really, in Tai Chi, much everything, this sort of dual purpose of both preparing mind and body for the session, for the various movements that we're going to make. In terms of the body, just warming up a little bit, and allowing the blood to begin to circulate more freely through muscles and tendons and ligaments and soft tissue, so that they're just naturally more supple as a consequence. And in terms of mind, in terms of our attention, really the first stage, and something that we want to try and sustain consistently, is this general sense of our attention coming into our body. So that's arguably one of the more difficult aspects of Tai Chi. When we lose that focus of attention, we sort of lose the movement. We lose some of the essence of the art. And one of the things that's quite interesting to try, particularly for people who do have a little bit more experience, is just to see if you can notice that moment when your attention comes back. So, particularly people with more experience, an exercise like this, we do it every week, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you do it every day. You just stand there and the thoughts drift away and you're kind of wondering what you're going to do this evening, or think about what happened yesterday or something like that. And then you suddenly realize and you bring your attention back. And in that moment of your attention coming back, what happens? What is there to notice, to observe? I'm not suggesting there should be any particular thing. It's just a little exercise, really, in really fine-tuning your awareness. It's helpful to build in more detail about things like posture, about how you're moving, about what the outcomes of that movement are. So again, I'll come forward a little bit. My feet. I want to bring my weight forward. This is exaggerated. But a natural response to this is that your body will tense up because you feel as though you're going to fall forwards. But often what we do is we'll stiffen up in the upper part of our body. But really what we want to do, and again, this is exaggerated, is let the hips drop back, and that brings us back down and brings us more to the upright position. This is rooting down. So don't assume that rooting down necessarily means that your knees bend a great deal. Sometimes they do, but at the start of the process, it's this feeling of releasing, of unclenching in muscles around lower back, hips, buttocks, that kind of area, knees and thighs. So that rather than this feeling that you're struggling to simply maintain a posture, becomes much more settled and your center of gravity drops. And one of the qualities that I associate quite strongly with this is a feeling of space within the body, particularly in the center part of the body. And this is where I'm moving from. My arms are just following the movement. You can imagine your arms, well, you don't have to imagine, your arms are quite heavy, just feel the weight of your arms so that they swing around, and you'll find after a while that it's very regular where they fall. Lower your backhand, the hair will fall roughly across this area, and the spine reach your pelvis, and at the front, just across your hips there. There'll be some variation in that, and although we're all different sizes, we're all proportionally all more or less the same. So this will work for most of us approximately. And just feeling how this generates a sense of movement, particularly right up through your upper body. Also movement down in your legs and into your feet. It's a bit more subtle. Bring your hands palm forwards and raise them up a little. No higher than your shoulders. And you can see my hands are at shoulder height, but my elbows somewhat lower. Notice how your attention does actually gravitate to the upper part of your body. And we don't want to lose that focus of attention on the upper part of our body, but we don't want it to eclipse an awareness of what's going on in the lower part of the body. So there's when I talk about bringing attention back, actually, it's useful to get into the habit of bringing your attention back to your feet, your legs, your center, and that feeling of being rooted, because that's most easily lost. Every now and then, just for those, if you can do so, if you have a sense of what I refer to as central equilibrium, just remind yourself these are the qualities that you want to try and feel while you're moving it. Now let your hands drop down, and a little extra one in a way, just a little kind of gentle bouncing movement, not a rapid movement. Sometimes we do this quite quickly, but this is quite kind of slow by comparison. Just feeling that as you drop down, you again releasing tightness in your hips, your lower back, your knees, your ankles, muscles in between, developing a kind of springy feeling in your legs. And you notice my arms have started moving. I haven't tried to move them, but that bouncy feeling transmits up through your body, and your arms just naturally begin to swing. There's no particular way that they should be swinging here. But it's a good way of realizing that actually one of the principal energies that we work with in Tai Chi really comes from this sinking down. It's like bouncing a ball. If you want to catch a ball on the way up, you've got to drop it down first. So we drop down, we let gravity pull our hips down, and then we feel the movement upwards. And that gradually has an effect right up to our back and in to the whole of our upper body, including arms and hands. We won't do this for too much because it can be quite hard on the knees if you're not used to it. But I'd recommend this as both a conditioning exercise and also as an exercise to kind of tune your awareness into these movements within the body. So now, put 1 foot forwards, keep the width of your step. Don't make it too long a step. And that same kind of what we might call a bouncy energy. But this time you drop into the back foot, and rather than letting it push you up, your intention is to push you forwards. And the same thing as you go into the front. These two movements, I think, together constitute one of the major sort of energies, one of the major dynamics that we work with in these arts. The downward movement is a yielding movement, and essentially allowing gravity to pull down. And a key area there to be aware of is actually your hips again. The Chinese term for that is Liu. That's a very characteristic energy of the whole system. The upward movement, the bounce up, Chinese term is Peng. The classic image for Peng is if you get a block of wood and you push it down into water, then as you start to do that, immediately you will feel the buoyancy of the water pushing up. And you push down and it gets harder and harder to do that. And if you take your hand away, the piece of wood will bob up. And it's described as a rising, expanding energy. There are many dynamics within our body, many sort of types of energy, and I'm not suggesting this is the only one, but it's a very characteristic, it's very physical, kinetic and energy, and it's one of the main drivers of Tai Chi and Qigong. And you can perhaps see from this exercise that, again, I'm not trying to move my arms, but I would have to work quite hard to stop my arms responding to this movement. You may even find that your body's settling into a nice steady rhythm. And that can be one of the things that helps us to get a sense of the way this energy moves through the whole body, a kind of resonance. And then with your other foot forwards. These are good physical exercises. If you want to develop Tai Chi and Qigong, you can't overlook what I think of as the conditioning aspect. Any kind of physical activity has its own sort of process of conditioning muscles and tendons and ligaments and so on. And we're looking for a kind of supple elasticity in the soft tissue of our bodies. And also good exercises, as I've been describing, but that's getting a sense for some of the basic feelings, some of the basic principles that we're going to try and bring into the slower movements, which is usually a bit trickier. Okay, shake out. So going back to this basic stance, feet parallel, toes pointing forwards as much as possible. Easing forwards, once again, maybe until you feel you're about to fall forwards, but then releasing in the hips, lower back and so on, so that rather than feeling that you have to fight against gravity, you let gravity pull your hips down, just settle you down a little bit. And that releasing feeling I sometimes describe as the difference between here, I'm holding my fist very tightly clenched, and then I move to this, where there's a hollow within the fist. I still have the structure of the fist, but less stiff, and that feeling from this to this, from one to the other, that unclenching feeling is what I mean by terms like releasing, softening. And so going back to central equilibrium as a concept, as a feeling within the body, one image for central equilibrium was of the mountain, one that I'm rather fond of. And you could argue that the pathway to the mountain is through this process of releasing. So just standing for a moment, feeling that your legs are supporting you, of course. And you get a sense that your back supports the front of your body. So you want to avoid putting your belly in, tighten your chest or your shoulders. And if you do this for long enough, gradually getting the feeling that there's this stronger feeling, stronger structure perhaps within the body, includes your skeleton, that continues to support you into rocking the shape. So if, for instance, you apply that feeling of releasing to your shoulders and your chest, muscles release, you're no longer holding yourself tight, yet the chest cavity is still there because the rib system is still there. Now, going back to that bouncy feeling, this time doing it slowly, let your hips drop back a little bit more until you feel your legs beginning to push you up. Try not to have a set idea about how far you're supposed to go. You don't want to bend your knees too far. You probably won't have to go down too far before you feel quite a strong movement upwards. And you probably won't have to go up too far before once again you feel the pull of gravity. And the idea is to simply allow those movements to take over. So it's like there's the push up, and then eventually gravity takes over and you pull down. There's a kind of tipping point. Expanding and contracting, bringing your hands around as though you're cradling the ball. This on the expansion, pushing your elbows away from each other. That will just draw your hands up, and then as though your hands are resting on the ball, and you're sinking down, pushing the ball down. This is the exercise rooting down. So remembering that rooting down isn't simply equatable with bending your knees. At this point, releasing in your hips, dropping down. Bending your knees more can lead to a deeper sense of the root and a stronger sense of pushing up, as long as you're not fanatical about it. Don't go down and think, well, I can bend my knees more and more and more, because all that happens then is you start to strain your knees. But the root is something that we want to continually cultivate in Tai Chi. It's that dropping into the center of gravity that is a principal agent in developing the postures, because the lower your center of gravity, the more stable you are. The lower your weight drops, the less weight you have to carry on your back and your shoulders and so on. And the lower your center of gravity, the deeper your root, the stronger the sense of pushing up. Again, don't do this exercise with the idea that kind of like, last week I could bend my knees so far. There could be all sorts of reasons why the knees don't want to bend that far. Listening to your body is a key element here, and just noticing that point of change. Again, noticing what happens when you bring your awareness back to your body. Breathing coming just nice and smoothly. You may find that your breathing naturally develops a pattern that harmonizes with the movement. Not really significant at this point whether you breathe in at a certain point or breathe out at a certain point. Just let the breathing follow the movement of expansion and contraction in whatever way is most comfortable for you. And then turning your hands out into the movement, the wild goose. What should I do this in a slightly exaggerated fashion? I through the push up, expand through my body, it pushes my elbows out, and that draws my fingers up. And then at a certain point, my elbows drop. Now, that was very exaggerated, so it's not that obvious, but it's a way of bringing your attention to more of your body than just your hands. Try not to stand there, sort of lifting your hands up and down. And one of the features, I think, in Tai Chi and Qigong, and one of the great takeaways, one of the great benefits is this growing sense of how your body can move as one unit and how body and mind can move as one. A sense of gathering in that begins to be associated quite strongly with this quality of calmness, stillness that develops. That again, this points us back towards the mountain, towards central. And if the image of the bird in flight offers some kind of quality compatible with that, then that's great. Imagery can be a very powerful tool. But don't chase after the images. The idea of the images as we use them in these arts is to bring your attention more fully into your body, to work with your body, to maybe use the imagery to sort of change things in your body. But if we get too involved with the image separate from the body, actually we begin to lose that sense of the body, and the image becomes a barrier rather than an asset. And then parting the clouds. It's a lovely feeling of just opening up a little bit, comparable to the feeling when the sun comes out from behind the clouds. So sometimes it's worth investigating an image and working with an image, but realize that when you do that, you are sort of bringing your attention away from your body. And really what you want to do, if you think, what's you on about parting the clouds, you want to ponder that image, that's fine. But there should always be an intention to take that back into the physicality of the movement. And that's not just the mechanics of the movement, but the sense of the energy as well. Remember that principles of kinetic energy. It's a very physical thing that we experience. I find it best just to let those images rest. And I might use a particular exercise and I'm aware of an image associated with it or some qualities that come across at some point, but rather than thinking this is what I must feel, just focus on the exercise and see what comes through, see what works in enhancing the movement. And after this one, just changing into dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So letting your arms drop down again, aware of the weight of your arms, focusing on the expansion on one side of your body, pushing up, winding your arm around and pulling down. Bring your attention to the center of your body, then to the opposite side, and repeat that on the opposite side. Don't stretch your hand up. There is once again, your elbows being pushed out, drawing your fingers up, your elbow drops, There's this sort of a crank, bringing your hands up. This is an interesting exercise to investigate how we actually make this movement of bringing our hands up above our shoulders, which we don't do that often in these arts. But to do it without straining, without a sort of strong focus on, I've got to lift my hand up. We observe the movement. You push up, your elbow drops down. How far can your hand go without recreating that tightening in your body? Where do you feel the expansion working? And if it's appropriate, if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'd quite like my hand to go a bit higher, nothing wrong with that. But recognize that the movement is built from the inside out. So we bring our attention and our intention, not so much to our arm and our hand, but rather to those processes that are working between our foot and our shoulder, those areas of expansion and contraction, building those up to increase the range of the external movement. Do one more on each side of this. When you come down on that final side, don't go a long way down. Go back to this, what I think of as the top position, hips just dropping back a little bit, still allowing that free flow through your body. Bring your hands to your sides. And then focusing on the feeling of an upward movement through your body. Let that push your hands up just a little bit above your head. And then down, coming back down, rest beside your hips. And then once again, the expansion, this time pushing your hands out to the sides and turn your body a little. And then coming back. Push out, turn the other way, bumping into the wall here. But this is an exercise that really encourages this drawing back of your attention to that central part of your body. And as your hands come to settle here, just rest here for a moment. Feel that it's this part of your body that's dropping down towards the ground, your center, including your center of gravity. You've already established to a degree, and we'll do a bit more on this later, that when your hips drop back, tends to bring you to the upright position. And we find in this exercise that when we rotate horizontally, it moves our arms forward. So pushing in 4 directions. First direction is upwards, like an expansion from that center part of the body, and then a contraction. And then turning. Realize that when the center expands, it doesn't just push upwards and outwards, it pushes downwards as well. So there's still that very strong sense of the root of the connection to the ground. And you might even want to extend this idea of the center, rather than just the physical center of the body, to include your feet and your legs as well. So that whole part of your body becomes slightly more compressed, and then the expansion, and it's our intention that does something that shapes that expansion as it comes through into the upper part of the body. And we begin to get a sense of the phrase suits you. We can actually direct the energy. We have an idea, and as you get more used to the movements, this is a process that will become more familiar to you. Don't be in a hurry though. It's enough if you realise that your arms are going out, your body's turning. Again, remember just to notice the feeling of your attention coming more fully back into your body. It's not that we're not concerned with what's happening around us with the external, but we don't want to do so at the expense of that inner awareness. This time, let your hands drop down again. Bring your attention to one side of your body and your intention to one side, following that pattern of expansion. Then push your arm out and up and then straight down center. So describing a half circle. And again, the way we think about this affects how we do it. Try not to think in terms of, I've got to do this with my hand. If you feel that expansion, just let it push your hand out. And if your hand continues moving, it will naturally swing up. And then you just let it come down the center line. And if it's comfortable for you, you can also add a turn that brings your hand across a little bit more. Change now to the opposite side. Notice any difference between one side of your body and another. You may find, for instance, you're less able just to allow the movement to happen in the way that I described. You know, to allow the expansion to push your hand out on one side and another. We can get very busy with our hands. Once again, bringing your attention back to your center, feeling that downward movement through your body, feeling the upward movement, pushing your hand away. And then comfortable adding the turn. Your hands drop down, going back to sinking down and pushing it. As we do this so far, we've done it in a way that maintains up our pelvis feeling level. This time, without straining, being careful with your knees and your back, push your hips back as you go down. Then let gravity pull them down so your pelvis levels off, and that brings your head and shoulders up, and then pushing them. Don't rush this. When we come to the upright position, just take a moment to sort of settle into this and then push it on. Be very careful with knees and back, and come back, settle, and this time push up. Your arms follow the movement, and then they get swung forwards. So you're rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. One more time. After this, we combine two rotations, horizontal and vertical. You bring your hands, your point in front of your belly, palm down, turn. Then you push your hips back to push your hands forwards, swing your hips across, come back to the upright position and return to the center. It's called polishing the table. Go in the other direction. Go from the back, you can see perhaps more clearly my hips are doing. I am exaggerating a little bit so that hopefully you can see. Remember, it's not just about big movements. Sometimes you might find it's worthwhile doing movement a bit smaller. When we make smaller movements like this, quite often we find ourselves using our body very differently. They're sometimes too small and subtle for the big muscle groups. We end up using very fine motor movements. And as you get used to this, once again, building up those smaller movements into the bigger movements. You could include in those smaller movements gentle extension through your spine, as though when your hips go back and your head goes forwards, the spaces between the vertebrae in your spine are just extending out very little, nothing too dramatic, but the build up, the combination of all those movements adding up to the bigger movement. And because you're putting less strain in, because your attention's going more deeply into the body, possibly even a sense once again of the energy. One more time on your side. And then just stand and shake it. One of my teachers likes to quote his Chinese teacher in saying that small movements are better than big movements, and that no movement is better than small movement. The no movement refers to the intention that we put into the movement. The small movements are these small changes within the body. And if you think about it from a physiological point of view, if I say lift my arm up like this, then if you were to study that in detail with an electron microscope or something like that, then there would be, I don't know how many millions, billions of tiny little changes within the muscles that in combination produce the bigger movement. It's also the smaller movements in some cases that are more likely to respond to our intentionality. A small movement like your mouth watering when you see a photograph of something interesting to eat, for instance, can actually cause quite significant changes in your mouth, in your stomach, and so on and so forth. And so by bringing a degree of awareness and conscious, deliberate intentionality to the movement, we can start to influence the movement. And so we bring together in Tai Chi three elements, sometimes referred to as the three treasures, the three jewels of Tai Chi, which is obviously our physical body and the mechanics of the movement. We can't get away from that. There's no suggestion that we're going to. Then there's the movement itself, the flow, the energy, however you care to label it. And then there's various aspects of mind. Mind having a very broad definition, not just our thoughts, but our feelings, the use of imagery, our memories, and so on and so forth. All these elements coming together, not as separate elements kind of vying against each other, but really coming into one unit. I think of these three elements as being like the three legs of a tripod. Each one supports and is supported by the other. At any given time, we may choose to put our attention into one or the other. But the long-term intention is that we don't make that discrimination, that these things work together. Now, I'm going to change stance. We're going to go back to that forward stance that we used earlier, the bow stance. So turn one foot out and step forward. You can still see the background between my legs. So I'm still in that hip width stance. And once again, just transferring your weight forwards and backwards. Giving yourself a moment to experience that releasing feeling, to feel the push coming up through your leg, and directing it forwards or backwards. So don't hurry this. Before we were doing it quite quickly, but put a little bit of emphasis on that just a few moments of settling into the leg. This isn't forwards, backwards. This is going back, releasing. Feeling yourself being pushed forwards, releasing. When we notice these little moments of our awareness coming back, these small changes like that feeling of unclenching muscles and so on and so forth, we're also bringing our attention very deeply into our body. And this starts to make us aware of another aspect of central equilibrium, another attribute to the mountain, which is this sense of stillness, calmness. Just a way of not ignoring, but sitting back from all those other things that are going on in our lives, not with a view to ignoring them or pretending they're not happening or not wishing to engage with them, but recognizing this as a way of beginning to engage with them in a slightly less frantic way, perhaps, or without the same kind of constriction on our movements. In a way, you could argue that this allows for a much more creative way of approaching those external factors. Remember those qualities of the posture, and in particular, that sense that deeper within the body, there's this, what we can call a stronger feeling, something that still continues to support. And that inner strength, that inner resilience, it begins to pervade the whole movement. And once again, that's something that we can take out into our daily lives. Then, as you come back, just raising your toes a little bit, remember we have an option of directing our movements. And when we move slowly, there's more opportunity to do that. So you go into your back foot, you feel yourself sinking down, you're releasing the front hip as well, and you raise your toes. When you go forwards, you settle into the front foot, you push the back knee forwards, you let the hip release, and the heel comes up, and gradually more of your weight begins to settle into the back foot, and you get closer to a point where the whole of your body is aligned over one leg. So you're aligning with the pull of gravity, you're aligning upper and lower body, you're allowing your roots to drop more. And this helps you to remain stable. So at this point, bringing your foot in, step out. When you take a step forwards, put your heel down first, lower your toes and the ball of your foot. When you step back, it's the ball of your foot that goes down first and then your heel. You'll notice that I've got my front foot slightly turned out. I find that helps my weight to settle. And when you place the foot, gently push the foot in. You plant the foot. And I really like this image of planting. If you were to put a seedling in a pot and you sort of you create a hole and you put the seed in, and then you just gently press down the earth around that seedling. And this just gives you a greater contact with the ground beneath your feet. Shake hands. Have your other foot forwards. You don't have to take a step to do that planting. So I go into my back foot, and then what I want to do is I want to plant the front foot and then let my weight move. And the same going back. It's interesting what you can notice. Sometimes you might notice that the foot is there and you thought it was quite relaxed, but actually maybe you're scrunching the toes up or pulling them back, or maybe holding some kind of tightness in your ankle or something like that. So this starts to make you aware of how you can get a much more consistent contact with the ground. Of course, that's going to impact on that rooting down, and that build up of energy, and so on and so forth. It also have an effect on your stability. So raising the toes and the heel, lowering the toes, planting the foot, raising the heel, and lowering, planting the foot, until you feel that you're able to just take this step in. And then either going forwards and backwards, just take a few steps through, one step at a time, don't rush. And change direction. You don't have to lift the foot right up. You could just bring your foot in, place your toes down to stabilize yourself, and then take the rest of the step. Okay. Have your right foot forwards. Start with your weight in your back foot, and then do the push forwards, and this time let your arms just trail behind and then swing through in the movement, fisherman casting. Most of the time, you're pulling on your arms until you settle into the leg, and you just let the arms swing through. They curve downwards and upwards quite naturally. Remember, that happens when they're attached at one end and not at the other, which hopefully they still are. So there's a slight movement, a slight expansion upwards. Remembering that when we move in the center of our body, when we turn, our arms will follow going forwards. And as you arrive in the front leg, turn, so your arms swing forwards and backwards. Move back, letting your hands drop down, settling into your back foot, turn in the opposite way. So wind blows the rhythms. As you contract in and expand in. Contract in, releasing into the back leg, feeling the push up, expanding through them. Remember, when you do wind blows the willows, that actually, you know, if I go back to fisherman cast and net, my arms are already on the way up here. I'm not having to lift them. There's already the energy, the momentum swinging my arms up, and it's just a turn. So try not to get into doing this. Remember, the movement builds like in the wild goose, in the sense the elbows going out, going out first. So have your left foot forwards and starting the game with fisherman cast the net. Maybe noticing as your arms swing past your hips and swing up, where do you feel the patterns of movement in your back and your sides? Which parts of your body are expanding as your arms rise up? Which parts are contracting? And then the same in reverse. So that if we wanted the arms to go further, then maybe we can bring our attention and our intention to those small subtle changes within the body. So we don't become top heavy again. So now, turning. I'm not suggesting the arms don't do anything. The arms create the shape. There's an image, and particularly again, as you get to know the movements better, it's almost like you have that image there, and the intention is for your arms to flow into that image, to recreate that image in one way or another. Still keeping that connection to the ground. And this time, when you go forwards, push the back knee forwards, or if you're going to go backwards, do it the same way. Bring the foot in. And this is where we really don't want to feel that our arms are sort of tight, but we've still got that sense of dropping down, hips still dropping back. Step through, plant the foot. As you go into that leg, drop your hands down, turn. Do the same thing here. This is dragonfly skims the water. Now, if it feels appropriate, don't take silly chances, but maybe just raising the knee up, rotating your leg. If this feels too precarious for you, then just keep your foot down. It's quite challenging. Don't tense up your shoulders or your back. I'm going to change direction before I bump into the camera. Establishing, planting the foot, bringing your body into line with your supporting leg, making sure that you're able to root down. And only then really feeling that, well, maybe I'll try just raising the leg. Dragonfly skims the water. Do one more. If you want to build that particular movement, but it feels a bit kind of like precarious, one thing you can do, you don't have to even move the arms. You could just do this. And I'm holding on to the wall here. And the reason I'm doing that is because essentially what we're trying to do is when we bring the leg up, we're trying to sort of relax the body, which is counterintuitive. There's a bit of support there. You can begin to understand how that can actually help you. So, you know, and you could do the exercise. If I do it here, I'm just going to go from side to side. I've got the wall behind me, which gives me a sense of security. If I get to here and I'm like, oh, I'm going to fall over, I'll just fall back against the wall. And so I'm more likely to be able to get that feeling of releasing when I feel that I'm not risking a serious fall or something like that. So rubbing your hands together now and just with the palms of your fingers tapping over your face. And then work up over your head and neck, the palms of your hands or your fingers. shoulder, your arm, feel how your arm vibrates as you strike it. Then on the other side. Finish your back. As much of your back as you can cover comfortably. You still see it get through. Around your hips. And then your legs. Your belly. And finally, the upper part of the chest. And the last exercise is embrace tiger, return to the mountain. This sense that we can reach out, but then come back, as it were. So coming back to how we relate to this idea of central equilibrium. Start by sinking down and then pushing up, let your arms spread out. Vertical gravity on your hips and your shoulders, bringing your hands around as though you're holding the ball, then letting your elbows drop, and finally just dripping down. When you're breathing, following a nice steady rhythm. Some people like to combine that sense of releasing, of coming back with an out breath. It's kind of sighing out breath. So that suits you to try that once or twice, but never force your breath. Don't hold your breath. And embrace tiger, return to mountain. Notice how in the process of returning to the mountain, you again load the legs so it creates the potential for the movement outwards. One more time. And release them. Lovely. Thank you very much. As always, just enjoy the rest of your evening and hopefully that was useful to you.